I think that's it. So yeah, Carl, whenever you're ready. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Hi, everyone. My name's Carl, and I'm here with my colleague Maggie. We are both representatives of Silversea Cruises, and we work very closely with Heidi. Maggie is the area sales director for, what is it, the Midwest, Maggie?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, the Midwest, yes.
And I'm the director of expedition sales, and I support Maggie specifically on the expedition side of things. So today, Heidi wanted us to chat about Antarctica, specifically a voyage that she's hosting in November of 2021. So we'll talk about the destination very, very generally, how to get there and different ways that you might want to go and explore Antarctica. And then we can talk some specifics about the date, the voyage that Heidi's chosen, and about the ship that that will be doing that particular voyage. So we'll start. Can everyone see my screen? Can you see this sort of Antarctic landscape with Silversea Expeditions on top? You see that, Maggie?
Yep.
Great. Okay, we'll start with a video. Hang on, there's one question already. Yes, oh, okay, thank you. Okay, we'll start with a video.
The White Continent. This really feels like Earth's last frontier. It's so wild and remote here, but you instantly feel at peace. Everything is so vast, so pure, quiet. It's awe-inspiring. The ice, the whales, the ocean. This is a sanctuary we all have to treasure and preserve.
So hopefully that gets you a little bit excited for what we're about to do and what we're about to talk about. It really is a destination of superlatives, and I've been really fortunate to have been 4 times, and our marketing department provides us with these incredible images and beautiful videos and all these great tools to promote it. And the fact that I've been a couple of times and I never feel like I'm doing it any justice. You know, a lot of times you go to a destination and you say, well, it's like this without the crowds, or it's like that, but with white sand instead of brown sand, or, you know, there's some way to compare it to another destination. There's no other destination that you can compare Antarctica to, even the Arctic. The two are vastly, vastly different. I'll explain a little bit about that and why, certainly from an expedition cruising perspective. But it really is, you know, it's the coldest, highest, driest, windiest continent. It's the least populated. There's just so much about it. You know, I went the first time expecting nothing but white, and I was contacting photographers and how do I photograph this, and, you know, what settings and whatever. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of shades of blue, because of the way the light hits the ice. And you would think a sunny day is better, but a sunny day washes everything out. You kind of want an overcast day for great photography, because then you get those blues coming out of the iceberg. So it's one of those places that you could just go off on a tangent talking about one particular aspect of it and go on and on and on. But I think that's one of the great things about it. We've been traveling to Antarctica. This would have been our 13th season. So we know what we're doing. We've got the right ships, we've got the right gear, the right equipment, and the right team. And we'll talk a little bit about all of those. It really is for nature lovers, wildlife lovers, historians. It's a life-changing journey, because there's no other place like this. You will feel the most remote you've ever felt of anywhere else on Earth, because you're so far removed from everything else. The expertise that we bring to it, our expedition team is made up of people with undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees, and many times they are leading experts in their field. They've had books written about them, or they've written books. They've been the topic of films, or they've had films made. They're historians, they're biologists, they're marine biologists, they're ornithologists, any number of things. And they're the ones who bring it to life. So I said we've been doing this for 13 seasons, and typically on one ship, that ship might operate 8, 9, 10 voyages a year to Antarctica. So you're on deck and you're looking at something and you're talking to one of the expedition team members, or you're in the bar, or you're in a dining room and you're talking to one of them, and you find out that this person has been with us for 8 or 10 seasons. And then you do the math and you quickly find out, and they'll tell you they've been 60 or 80 or 100 times to Antarctica. So these are the people you want beside you when you're walking on a beach in Antarctica and you see something in the surf, or you see a penguin colony, or you've got a question about the whale that just breached, or the ice, or the history. These are the people that you want explaining it all and bringing it to you. With 3 ships operating in Antarctica, we can offer a wide variety of destinations, and everything that we do at Silversea. Our classic destinations like the Caribbean and the Med and the Baltics, as well as the expedition destinations, Antarctica, the Arctic, the Galapagos, everything is included. So the cruise fares include your international economy class airfare from home to the destination. Where pre-nights or post-nights are required, those are included. Once you get on the ship, of course, all food and dining is included. Tell us how you want your minibar stocked, or your bar. We'll stock it that way and keep it replenished throughout the voyage. Butler service in every suite category, Wi-Fi in every suite category, so internet access. All gratuities are complimentary, and it's all factored in already. So really, there's nothing to dip into your pocket for. And on expedition, all of these excursions that we're going to talk about Zodiac cruising and sea kayaking and all of the hiking, everything that we're talking about, that's all included as well. Because typically when you arrive somewhere, there's infrastructure, and there might be 8 or 10 different tours to choose from because there is all that infrastructure. When we go to Antarctica, we are the infrastructure. There isn't any. So we create it. We create the tours. We offer the tours themselves because we are the tour operator in addition to being the cruise operator. So we'll go into that a little bit more as well. So I mentioned the experience. We were the first ultra luxury cruise line in Antarctica. So Antarctica wasn't new from an expedition cruising perspective. It had been done before we started doing it. But the concept was, Silversea was about 10 or 12 years old. And then somebody said, why don't we take the concept of Silversea, which is very small, ultra luxury ships, and put some of those ships in these destinations that are impossible to get to on your own? And that was the genesis of Silversea Expeditions. And it took off from there because there were a lot of people that were looking to go to Antarctica, but they didn't want to do it on an old Russian research vessel. They didn't want to have to share a bathroom with 3 other people. They didn't want to have to share a suite with 3 other people, and they didn't want a cafeteria style dining room. That's all gone now with Silversea Expeditions. We have a great partnership with the Royal Geographical Society. So very often we'll have lecturers from the Royal Geographical Society. This is based in the UK. Artwork and prints of theirs all over the ships, and access to maps and different things that the Royal Geographical Society lends to us, sometimes on permanent loan. I mentioned, that it's a great destination for wildlife lovers and nature lovers, also for photographers, of course. Lots of time to get ashore and to interact with the wildlife. There are many, many guests who will spend as much on new camera gear or a new lens for this trip as they will on the cruise fare, believe it or not, because they want to get that cover photo, magazine cover photo, and then blow it up and put it on a wall, feature prominently in their home. So great for photographers. All of the Zodiac cruising I mentioned and land and sea tours, they're all led by the expedition team. We never send you out on your own. So you've got these experts beside you all the time, and all of that is inclusive, as I mentioned. So we try to make sure that we have no more than 10 guests in the Zodiac. Typically it's fewer, but as high as 1 to 10 guests in the Zodiac. And that's to give everybody room, because everybody needs a little bit of elbow room when they've got their cameras and their binoculars. You want to be able to stand up, and everyone's likely got a backpack on, or they've got a backpack at their feet. So we don't want to cram the Zodiacs full. We want to make sure that everyone has space. This is likely the only time they're coming to Antarctica. So space in the Zodiac for your gear so that you can get the photograph, so that you're comfortable, so that you can swing around and see the whale as it breaches. On the Silver Cloud, which is the vessel we're going to talk more about, we have 28 expedition team members for 240 guests. So a guide to guest ratio of 1 to 8.6. That's amazing. For every guide, 8.6 guests. So we can really break up into small groups. And again, hammering home that idea that everything is all inclusive. Just to mention it here again, a pre-night cruise and post-day room where required. The economy class international flights are included, butler service in every suite, multiple restaurants on the Cloud. We have 4 dining options to choose from, 24-hour dining service. The gratuities are included, Wi-Fi, as I mentioned, and all beverages. Also on Expedition, the expedition team that we talked about, all the Zodiac exploration. And in these photos, you'll notice everyone wearing a red parka. The parka is complimentary as well. So in case you don't want to lug the parka all the way down to Chile or Argentina to start the voyage, there's a brand new one in the bag waiting for you, folded up in your suite when you arrive on the ship. It's one less thing that you have to worry about finding and lugging down, because it takes up a fair amount of luggage space, and it's yours to keep. Some people opt to bring them home with them. It's a beautiful piece. It's 3-in-1. It's got an insulating section. It's got a windproof, waterproof layer, a shell. You can wear those independent of each other. You can zip them together and wear it as this great parka piece, which is really, really, it's perfectly suited for this destination. We explore Antarctica with 3 different vessels: the Silver Explorer, the Silver Cloud, and the Silver Wind. You can see their relative guest capacities, 144, 240, and 274. The Cloud and the Wind are sister ships. So the Cloud was a classic cruise ship. She was doing the Med in the Caribbean and that sort of thing. And in late 17, so just over 3 years ago, we converted her into an expedition ship. She had a $70 million refurbishment. It didn't cost that much to build the ship in the first place. The refurbishment to make her an expedition ship, we took her guest capacity down from 296 guests to 240 to make room for the Zodiacs and the kayaks. Plenty of room for all of these expedition staff that I mentioned, 28 of them. And we put more steel in the hull to give her a high ice class so that she can go into polar waters. Her sister ship, the Silver Wind, which is a year younger than the Silver Cloud, she will get the same treatment sometime this year before she starts sailing in Antarctica in November of next year. So 3 vessels. All the accommodations are suite style. The service is incredible on board, both from the expedition team and obviously the food and beverage team and the hotel team. We'll talk a little bit more about the dining, but there are 4 dining options to choose from. Everything included, so that all-inclusive lifestyle. You're never reaching into your pocket. You're never signing a chit. Everything is covered. And the fact that we've been doing this for 13 years and have an incredible expedition team. Ignore the map on the left. This is a part of Antarctica that we were going to visit, this area south of Tasmania and south of New Zealand in the Ross Sea area of Antarctica. We were scheduled to do that this coming year, but with everything going on, that's all been changed, put on hold for the time being. So everything that we're going to focus on talking about in terms of the ways to get to Antarctica, we will talk about from South America. This is the traditional way, and I would say this is where 95% of commercial operations, maybe even 98% of commercial operations to Antarctica depart from. So in terms of the regions that we're visiting, the first and foremost one is the Antarctic Peninsula. I'll show you a little bit later on a map that's a little more detailed, but you can see here, this tip of Antarctica that's sticking up, that's sticking north, where you see the words Antarctic Sound, South Shetland Islands, Expedition Antarctic Peninsula, that area known as the Antarctic Peninsula, is just north of the Antarctic Circle. The Antarctic Circle is right about here. So that means that this part of Antarctica is the first part of Antarctica to thaw in the spring, and it's the last part of Antarctica to freeze up in the late fall or winter. That's great because it means that the wildlife tend to congregate there. They focus on that area, or they hang out in that area because they've got a very, very short season to meet and to mate and to lay their eggs and raise their chicks and get out of there before winter comes, because there's going to be pretty close to 6 months of darkness, or 6 months of near darkness, and very, very, very cold. Most penguin species cannot handle that. Only one, the emperors, can handle that. The rest of them need to get out of there. So it means that the season for the wildlife has been extended. It's also really important because this is the closest Antarctica gets to any inhabited landmass, in this case, South America. So from Ushuaia to the southern, to the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula is a 36-hour crossing. We can do that in a day and a half. So that's why there's so much focus on this part of Antarctica when we visit. So the peninsula, again, an important part of it. Typically, these are 10 to 12-day voyages. They differ only in the length of time that we spend at the peninsula. Some of our guests are saying, by the time I make my way to South America, and then I make my way over to Antarctica, I'd like to spend a few extra days. So instead of 6, we'll spend 8 days at the peninsula or in and around Antarctica, then make our way back. So that's a very typical Antarctic Peninsula cruise. Starting in December of 2021, we're offering something called the Antarctica Bridge, or the Flying Cruise Program. This is for folks who don't have that much time, who can't commit a full 2 weeks to get to South America, 10 days to go to Antarctica, and then a couple of days or an overnight flight to get home. So by the time it's all said and done, you're talking about 2 weeks. The Antarctica Bridge Program can be done in about 9 or 10 days. It's not that much shorter, but we saved 4 days because we're not going to sail across, we're going to fly across. In this case, we're starting in Punta Arenas, Chile. There is a specialized aircraft that we work with a Chilean company, and they fly us over. And what takes 36 hours to sail, we do in 2 hours. And we land at a little Chilean air base on one of the islands just north of the Antarctic Peninsula. Then we meet our ship. We still spend 6 days at the Antarctic Peninsula, and then we turn around and do it all in reverse. We fly that 2 hours from the little Chilean air base gravel strip back to Punta Arenas, overnight in Punta Arenas, and then you make your way home by day 10. So that overnight flight leaving Punta Arenas or Punta Arenas to Santiago and then home. So you're probably home on the 11th day. So it's a way for people who are very short on time or who are nervous about crossing the Drake Passage. They can do it that way. And then sometimes we'll do a specialized voyage late January of 2020. So about a year from now, we're doing a 20-day deep Antarctica expedition. This one will spend 16 days exploring the peninsula. So call it 2 days across and 2 days back. The remaining 16 days are all along the peninsula, getting away from every other tour operator, getting away from our own ships, and going much further south. We're hoping to get as far further south than the Antarctic Circle, and just visit different penguin colonies that don't see anybody along the way. We're doing this with the Silver Explorer. She has a very, very high ice class, and that allows us to get further into the ice and to get further south. We're also doing it late in the season. So by late January, most of the ice will have broken up. So the other region that we sometimes include on some of these itineraries, 2 areas, the Falklands and South Georgia. Some itineraries will include both. Some itineraries will include only one or the other. Both of them are very interesting. I've spent time at both. In the Falklands, I've spent a little more time there. Most people will say that they prefer South Georgia, or that if there's an itinerary that includes South Georgia, including the one that Heidi's talking about, that's the way to go. And there's some very good reasons for that. Personally, I like the Falklands. There's some great history there, lots of albatross if you're a birder. And yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the Falklands, this group of people clinging to these rocks in the Southern Ocean and trying to raise sheep in the middle of this incredible landscape. The South Georgia also has history. It's all the Shackleton history and how Shackleton with two other men made it to the northwest corner of the island, traversed the mountains with no mountain gear, mountaineering gear, made it to a Norwegian whaling station, alerted the Norwegians to the fact that there were all these other men stranded on Elephant Island. And so incredible history there, lots and lots of wildlife. It looks very much like Switzerland. You've got these incredible alpine peaks in the middle of the Southern Ocean. Many people call it the Switzerland of the Southern Ocean. So the two of them are fabulous destinations. And this is what an itinerary that includes both might look like. Depart from Ushuaia, head to the Falklands, head over to South Georgia, then to Elephant Island. And I'll talk about Elephant Island a little bit in a little while. And then onto the peninsula, and then you make your way back to Ushuaia. So let's talk specifically about what a voyage to Antarctica is like. Talk a little bit about what a typical day might be like. If you've got any questions, feel free to stick them in the chat box. If there's anything that I have glossed over, anything that I've missed, I'll try to get to it. So I just wanted to go back to the geography. Antarctica is a frozen continent surrounded by ocean. So there is literally a landmass under all of this ice. The ice is in some places 5 kilometers, so 3 and change miles thick. I think on average it's 1.5 miles thick, but there are places where it's more than 3 miles thick. You can see the Antarctic Peninsula, and I was talking before, see the red dotted line that creates that circle? That's the Antarctic Circle. So the fact that the Antarctic Peninsula lies north of that, and that's almost the only region in Antarctica that lies north of it, means that it's more temperate. It's a little bit easier for us to visit from an ice perspective. And it's also a great destination when we get there because of all the wildlife. There have been commercial operations from Africa, from Cape Town, for example, but it's about 4-day crossing to get here. And I mentioned the ones that we're looking at doing. We were planning to do them in 21 and 22 from southern New Zealand, taking in the New Zealand sub-Antarctic islands to kind of break up the journey. But again, it's 3 or 4 days to get across. So this is why this part of Antarctica is very, very popular from the southern tip of South America. In 36 hours, you're there. And again, very, very typical of an Antarctic Peninsula sailing. This is what the map would look like. And sometimes you'll see on the itineraries, and I've included the itinerary that Heidi's working on, you'll see where, it'll say day 11, Antarctica or Antarctic Peninsula, day 12, Antarctic Peninsula, day 13, Antarctic Peninsula. It's left vague on purpose, and we're not trying to, hide anything or try to lead you in a particular direction or anything like that. We leave it vague on purpose because we never know what we're going to get into. Unlike sailing in the Caribbean or the Med or the Baltics or even the Galapagos, where it's temperate, it's what the water temperatures are like. There are no ice conditions to worry about. The weather typically is pretty fair most of the time. And if not, well in advance, and you can work around that sort of thing. In Antarctica, we never know what we're going to encounter. We go at a time of year between November and February where we think we've got most of the bases covered. It's obviously not the worst time of year to go. It's the best time of year to go from a weather perspective, the number of hours of daylight, all that sort of thing. But wind and waves and ice and weather in general can always wreak havoc. So when you see an itinerary that is vague like that, it's done on purpose, and it's not meant to mislead you in any way. This is Ushuaia, where we depart from. And the first thing you'll notice as we sailed for those 36 hours are the seabirds. In this case, the albatross. And the wandering albatross will follow us seemingly for days and days and days, hoping that we're going to churn up something. They kind of get used to boats, fishing boats in particular, throwing out dead fish and fish guts and things like that. So they're hoping we might do something similar. I'm just going to check quickly on the question. From the tip of southern South America, is there ever a time when the ship can't make it through the Drake Passage? No, there are times of year that we wouldn't go just because of ice. So the Antarctic season, as I mentioned, is from roughly the first week of November into maybe the second week of March. We're usually done by the end of February. We don't often go that late into March. So say it's 4 months, maybe 4 months and a week, 4 months and 2 weeks. That's the time of year when there's more light, when the temperatures are better, when the ice condition, when the ice has broken up and it makes it possible for us to navigate along the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula. But the Drake Passage is, first of all, it gets a bad rap. It's not only what you've seen on YouTube, because think about it this way. If you posted a video on YouTube of the Drake Passage when it's flat calm, like a mirror, no one would watch your video. It's not interesting. It's not exciting. When you post a video on YouTube of the Drake Passage when it's got 8-meter swells or 10-meter swells, that's interesting. That's going to get a lot of views, and that's going to get everybody talking. And then everybody's going to say, that's what the Drake Passage is like. That's what the Drake Passage can be like some of the time. We say that it's either the Drake Lake, the Drake Shake, or the Drake Quake. So the lake is about 30% of the time, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's flat calm. I've experienced it. You wouldn't believe it. The Drake Shake, it's kind of what you would expect. 3-4 meter swells, 5-meter swells. This is about 40% of the time. And then the Drake Quake. This is what everyone tries to avoid. It can get pretty hairy. And this is about 30% of the time. What we do to mitigate the Drake, a couple of different things. First of all, the Silver Cloud and the Silver Wind that I talked about, they were designed as 300 guest ships. So they're quite heavy for the number of guests that we carry. So they're very well placed in the water, very well situated. They've got stabilization as well. But the best thing about them is how fast they can go. These are very, very nimble ships. They typically do over 18 knots. So the captain and the expedition leader are sitting on board, sitting on the bridge on embarkation day. Guests are filing in. They're looking at the weather, and they're seeing that there's a storm brewing in the Pacific. The weather always goes from west to east. So from the Pacific through the Drake into the Atlantic or the Southern Ocean. And they see this thing brewing, and they say, well, if we leave when we normally leave and we go the speed we normally go, we're going to smack into this thing. So the captain will radio down to the pier and tell the longshoremen and the group down there, hey, today we're not going to leave at 9. We're going to leave at 6. So I need everyone to wrap up quickly. We always intend to leave at 6, but it's kind of an Argentinian 6. It's about 9. Things get a little, things slow down. They don't always go. It's kind of the South American mentality. I used to live in Brazil, so there's a fair bit of that. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. 6 means 7, or 7 means 8. In this case, we'll say, no. We're leaving at 6. And then the captain will use all the speed at that he can muster, or that the ship can muster. And we'll try to get across the Drake, and we'll actually save 6 or 8 hours, get there earlier than we anticipated, do it in 30 hours instead of 36, miss the storm. In other words, run ahead of the storm, get to Antarctica early, and the guests are waking up and they're already in Antarctica 6 hours earlier than they anticipated. Conversely, if the expedition leader and the captain are looking at the map and they're seeing the storm and it's right now in the middle of the Drake, there's no way to miss it. There's no way to outrun it. They're just going to put that up on the monitors all around the ship and ask the guests to take a minute and look at that and say, see that big swirling purple reddish thing in the middle of the Drake? We're not leaving right now, or when we intended to, because we're going to hit that if we do. So rather than leave at 6 p.m. tonight, we're going to leave at 6 a.m. or we're going to leave at 3 a.m. So they might delay the departure by 8 or 9 or 12 hours, still run full speed across the Drake, make up 6 of those hours, and end up getting there 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours later, but having missed the storm in the Drake. So there's a lot we can do to mitigate it. And the Drake gets an undeserved bad reputation, because it truly is something to be crossing that body of water and have an experience the Drake Lake. And I've done it a number of times. There were 2 times that I can think of off the top of my head where it was flat calm. No one could believe it. The sailors and the expedition team all knew they'd experienced it before. So I hope that that goes part of the way to explaining about the Drake. So then as you're sailing across, you're getting closer to the peninsula. One of the areas we want to head to initially is right at the end of the peninsula, called the Antarctic Sound, because if the conditions allow, we will round the sound. And just to get into that area, this is where the Weddell Sea is. It's kind of the opening, or one way to get into the Weddell. The Weddell is primarily frozen. You've got the Larsen ice shelf coming out into the Weddell. But what's interesting is, coming off the Larsen ice shelf, you've got these massive tabular icebergs breaking off, and they are making their way because of currents and wind and what have you, sort of in a northeasterly direction. And when we're up at Antarctic Sound, it's a great opportunity to see a number of these huge icebergs up in that area. So tabular icebergs are one of the first things you see. In some cases, these look like someone took a skyscraper, an office tower, and flopped it over on its side. They're that big. And unfortunately, the ship isn't here to give you some contrast, or to give you some perspective, I should say, of the ship against the size of that iceberg, just to give you a sense of how big it is. But they are enormous. So this is some of the first thing that you start to see, some of the wildlife, the albatross. Then you may get some dolphins or porpoises following along in the bow wake of the ship. Great for photography, as I mentioned before. So you're starting to see the ice, the temperature's going down. You can sense we're getting closer to Antarctica. This is real. And then as you get there, in some cases, with the Silver Explorer, it's easy because she's got a nice high ice class. She can go into 8 or 10 inches of ice. The captain will, quote unquote, park the ship in the ice, and then we lower a gangway and guests can get on and off this way. It's a really interesting experience. It doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's spectacular. One of the things I think that sets Silversea apart is the size of our vessels, not just in terms of the guest capacity. You know, I mentioned that in Antarctica, we're only going with 144 guests on the Explorer, for example, but you can see here how close she gets. So it's her guest capacity, but it's also her physical size and her draft. She's got a very, very shallow draft. So I think there's a misconception very often that when we disembark our guests and we move from the ship to Antarctica, or in this case, South Georgia, by Zodiac, it's a 15 or 20-minute Zodiac ride. Very often it's 5 or 6 minutes because of how close the ship can get to the landing site. This is a very typical landing. So you can see I think this is another misconception. Silversea is a luxury cruise line. Therefore, we're going to do Expedition Light. This is right in the thick of things. We're right in the guts of it. You can see how this Zodiac is coming ashore right at this rocky beach here, with thousands and thousands and thousands of king penguins in this area, hundreds at a time going into the water, hundreds at a time coming out of the water. There are likely orcas and leopard seals all over the place. You may see some seals flopping around on the beach here as well. Our expedition team there to welcome this Zodiac and to help these guests get off of the Zodiac and onto the beach. So this is not an Expedition Light thing. This is the real deal. Here you can see again a couple of Zodiacs coming in, doing a beach landing at Pebbly Beach. Lots of expedition team members there to help them off the beach. I think also there's a question or a concern sometimes that, do I need to be a triathlete to do this? How fit do I need to be? Well, you can see, you know, it's quite flat in most cases. You saw examples of dry landings and wet landings. This is another dry landing where we're doing everything we can to try and ensure the comfort of the guests. So in this case, we're bringing the Zodiac up onto this sort of rock shelf, and then expedition team members there to help you get off of the Zodiac, step onto that top bow piece, and then from there, usually onto some towels. We'll bring some towels from the ship, lay them over the rocks to make sure that nothing's slippery or wet, and then help guests get ashore from there. And you've seen how flat it is in some of these places. If this is as much activity as you want, a landing and get to a flat, pebbly beach like this and walk around on this beach and go to the nearest penguin colony, talk to the marine biologist or the ornithologist, and this is how you want to spend your time and this is how active you want to be, that's fine. That's it. That's all you need to do. The flip side of that is guests who say, well, listen, I'm pretty active when I'm at home, and I don't want this to be a floating buffet and not doing much else. What have you got in terms of activity? Every time we land, there's an opportunity to go on a hike. So with 28 expedition team members on the Silver Cloud, for example, we can really break it up into small groups and grab a set of trekking poles, find out which expedition team members are what they're doing and where they're headed, and join that group. And they'll make sure that there's always enough expedition team members. You know, if the group size gets larger, if it's 30, okay, let's add another expedition team member. If it's 20, then let's take one expedition team member off and go with 2 or 3. They're leading the way. There's also one trailing behind just to sort of herd the cats, if you will. And the trekking opportunities are spectacular, because the vistas when you get up there, whether it's of the bay where the ship is at anchor, some of the glaciers, if you go up on over the other side of an island, you can see what's going on over there, new glaciers, or excuse me, new icebergs calving off some of these glaciers. So there's plenty of activity for those who want to do the activity. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other activities, including sea kayaking, in a little while. So you can see, you know, as sedentary as you want to be or as active as you want to be. When we're ashore, I would say that the main attraction are the penguins and the penguin colonies, and you find them all over the place. You find small little clutches of them like this. Sometimes they're right up on the ice. At certain times of year, you'll see the penguins sitting on nests and on eggs. Certain times of year, you'll see the chicks having just been hatched. And then later in the year, you'll see, or later in the season, I should say, as the penguins get bigger, they lose that sort of cute, fluffy phase. They get into their gangly teenager phase. And then by the end of the season, by late February, early March, they need to be fully fledged. They need to have lost their down. They need to have their waterproof feathers on, or have those grown in. And then away they go with their parents before things ice up. Quickly back to South Georgia. This is an area at South Georgia called Salisbury Plain, where this colony is estimated to be 60,000 king penguins. So a trip to Antarctica isn't just about, you know, ice and penguin colonies and things like that. You get to a place like this, I think a lot of people are under the impression that to see huge congregations of wildlife like this, the last place on earth is to go to the Masai Mara, to go to the Serengeti, excuse me, and during the migration and see masses of wildlife like that. But here in South Georgia and some of the other smaller islands heading down to Antarctica, you've got colonies of 60,000 birds, 100,000 birds. There is a colony on an island called Zavadovsky. I believe they're Adelis, and it's a colony of an estimated 1.3 million penguins. So this is something that you just don't see in everyday life. To have this experience and to see this much wildlife in one place at one time is remarkable. I talked about some of the other excursions that we do and the fact that they're all included. So we don't want to crowd the landing site. So there are limitations as to how many guests we will take ashore at a time. So if you're talking about the Silver Explorer, for example, at 144 guests, we'll just take half of them. We'll take 70, just use round numbers. We'll take 70 ashore, and they're the ones that are hiking. They're visiting the penguin colonies. They're talking to the glaciologists and the ornithologists, the marine biologists, about the penguins and about stepping foot on the Antarctic continent. The other 70, we will take out in small groups, usually 10 people per Zodiac, in one of these Zodiacs driving around and doing what we call Zodiac cruising. It's a great way to get closer to some of the other wildlife. So the seals, the whales. It's great for photography because you've got this incredible perspective now of only being a few feet off the water. So the same landscape that you saw from the ship, you're now seeing it from the perspective of the Zodiac. And again, just, you know, a yard off the water. Or a glacier or an iceberg, the perspective changes dramatically. So the wildlife encounters, the landscape, the icebergs, the glaciers, everything about Zodiac cruising is amazing. So a day might start with a wake-up call at 6:30, breakfast at 7, and then off the ship at 8 o'clock. One group on land, one group Zodiac cruising. About an hour and a half or 2 hours elapse, and then we switch places. Those that were in the Zodiacs now get their turn on land, and those who were on land get their turn in the Zodiacs. Again, another hour and a half, 2 hours elapse. Everybody has had the same experience in the same location, and then we head back to the ship, 11:30 noon, for lunch. you know, everyone's in their expedition gear and in their North Face and their Patagonia and their Arc'teryx gear and whatever. So it's not particularly formal. Go for lunch, and during lunch and during that break of about 2 hours or so, the captain might navigate to a different area, not far away, half an hour navigation to 1 hour navigation, get to a different spot where there's a different species of penguin on shore. And then we do everything that we did in the morning, but in reverse. If you were in group one and you went and you did a landing first, you're now going to do a Zodiac cruise first. And if I was in the Zodiac group in the morning, the first Zodiac group, I'm going to be in the first landing group in the afternoon. Again, an hour and a half or 2 hours elapse, and then we switch places. Now I get my turn in the Zodiac and you get your turn ashore. So we talk about 2 landings a day. I talk about 4 excursions a day, a landing and a Zodiac cruise in the morning, and a landing and a Zodiac cruise in the afternoon. This is all based on conditions permitting. It's rare that we have to cancel an activity entirely, an entire morning or an entire afternoon. It's very, very rare. It happens more often that there's enough daylight when we're there, because there are 22 hours of daylight. If you go far enough south, 24 hours of daylight. At dinner or near the end of dinner, it might be 9 o'clock in the evening, still plenty of daylight. And one of the expedition team members will notice a pod of orcas very, very near the ship. We're going to drop some Zodiacs in the water. If anyone would like to come and join us and do another excursion today, come and join us. Put your gear on, put your parka, put your boots, everything on. That is more common than us having to cancel a full morning's activities or full afternoon's activities. It can happen. What's more likely to happen is if we pull into a bay that we intend to go to in the morning. We have, our plan is we're going to pull into this bay, but the wind blew from the wrong direction overnight and it filled the bay full of ice. We can't get in there. The ship could get in, but the Zodiacs can't, so we can't do a landing. Okay, let's go to the other side, the leeward side, because the wind will not have affected that area. It won't be blown full of ice. We'll be able to get in there. So we'll just have to modify our plan. So it's very much an expedition in the sense that people have to go with a great open mind and a great sense of adventure and just kind of take what comes. Again, we're not trying to not take you to certain places. It doesn't cost us more or less to do one thing or another. We have to do it safely. That's the first and foremost priority, because we're in water that is pretty close to freezing, sometimes a few degrees below freezing. We're in conditions that might be very, very windy and very, very icy. So safety is the first priority. And we always work with the conditions that are there. So again, just back to Zodiac cruising, it's a really integral part of an expedition to Antarctica. And again, great for photography, whether it's wildlife or landscapes and what have you. The other activity that is an optional one, again, fully included, we don't ask anyone to pay for this. We have 8 tandem kayaks. And tandem, you can see them here. There are 2 people, one up front and one sitting behind that person. These are Tandem Sea Kayaks. So with 8 tandems, we can take out 16 guests at a time. And there are 2 red solo kayaks. These are the kayak guides. So we don't send you out on your own. There are always kayak guides with you. Typically one at the front of the pack and one at the rear of the pack, just making sure that everyone's close together, relatively speaking, that you're not drifting too close to an iceberg or a glacier, pointing out things of interest along the way. These kayak guides are probably pointing out to these guests that this whale just dove and it's likely to resurface somewhere over here, sort of at the top center of the page. Why don't those who want to come with me and let's paddle a little bit closer and see how close we can get and see when this thing surfaces. I talked about the perspective of being in a Zodiac. The perspective of being in a kayak when you're in Antarctica is unreal. Now you're inches off the water. And the sights and the sounds and the smells are just so accentuated. You're away from the ship and the hustle and bustle and the noise of the ship. You're out with this group on your own. You're doing this for about an hour and a half or 2 hours to take advantage of this. There is just off screen, you can't see it, there is a Zodiac. And that Zodiac kind of follows us at a distance. If you could mute your mic, please. That Zodiac follows us at a distance. so that if anybody in this group got cold or tired or just wasn't feeling well, they raised their hands and the Zodiac would come and pick them up and take them back to the ship. A little bit more sea kayaking. And then there's one more activity, which a lot of people at the beginning of the cruise, and I could probably take a poll of you now and ask, who's interested in doing the polar plunge, where you're jumping into water that's anywhere between 30 and 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of you would say no, but by the time you get on the ship and you start your cruise, or you're midway through and you hear the expedition team talking about it and you talk to some people, we end up with about 50% of the people, anywhere between 30 and 50% of the guests end up doing this. There's a butler just off screen here at this little deck who has a tray of vodka shots. That seems to be a huge enticement for people to do this, which is odd.
So
because
Heidi,
it's
if you do it, then I'll do it with you, right?
And I wanted to give you a sense of what goes on at different times of year. So I said that we start our season in November. You may find some cruises that start in very, very, very late October, but you can see what you're getting into. Fewer hours of daylight, so maybe 16 hours of daylight instead of 20, 21 hours of daylight. The temperatures are a little bit cooler, so -5 Celsius, you're probably talking about 28 Fahrenheit. More ice, so fewer places you can go. And the penguins are just sort of starting their courting. When we start our season in November, we've already got more daylight. It's starting to warm up. The ice is breaking up a little bit. We can get into more areas. The penguins are nesting. And then as you go further in the season, you can see what happens with the number of hours of daylight. The daylight breaks up the ice, which means you can get into more areas. It also means that the temperatures are changing, getting a little bit warmer. The hatching of the penguins in December, usually early December, and then by late December, you've got the chicks, and in January, you've got the chicks. And then by the time we're heading out the end of the season, towards the end of February, again, these chicks should be fully fledged by that point. You can see how broken up the ice is. You can get pretty much anywhere you want to. You're starting to get fewer hours of daylight again, because believe it or not, winter's coming back, or the end of summer is coming, and they're going into the Antarctic autumn.
And just for anyone like me, I had to Google 2 degrees Celsius is 36 degrees Fahrenheit. So then it kind of goes like, that's the colder in November, and then it goes up from there. But
Right.
Yeah, Celsius means nothing.
Double it and add 32 is the easy conversion.
Yep.
So this is the itinerary we're talking about. It's the 14th of November 2021. It's a 16-day itinerary that includes South Georgia and Antarctica. In this case, we're departing Punta Arenas because it's early in the season. So what's happened is the Silver Cloud has made her way south along the west coast of North America, along the west coast of South America. Her cruise just before this one would have been from Chile, the Chilean fjords. So from Valparaiso, relatively near Santiago, so along the Chilean coast, through the Chilean fjords, and then making her way to Punta Arenas, Chile. This one then starts in Punta Arenas, goes through the Beagle Channel, goes straight to South Georgia, where you spend 3 days in South Georgia, then cross over to Elephant, which is one of the islands that just, if it was an extension, or it is a bit of an extension of the peninsula, this is where there's a lot, of course, of Shackleton history, where when the ship sank and they all got into the lifeboat, this was the first place that they made land, and this is where Shackleton left, I believe it was 20-something or 30-something men on Elephant Island, and then together with 2 others used the same lifeboat to get over to South Georgia with the type of navigation equipment they would have had in the early 1900s. So they didn't have a GPS. So there's a lot of history there. It's included in the itinerary, but please don't have the expectation that you will land at Elephant Island. It's very, very difficult to land at Elephant Island. There is one landing site, and it's not in a good spot. When the conditions are perfect, you can land there, but they have to be perfect. If they're anything but perfect, the waves make it too dangerous to land at Elephant Island. Of course, we'll slow right down. We'll spend a lot of time. The historians will tell their stories about Elephant and its importance, again, in the history of the Shackleton expeditions and that sort of thing. But just because it's included in the itinerary, please don't expect a landing there. It's very, very challenging. Then 3 days on the peninsula. And then as we head we start to head north again and cross the Drake to go back to, in this case, Ushuaia, to go back to South America. We'll make a stop in the South Shetlands. This usually includes King George Island, one of the small islands en route, and then do the Drake crossing and head over to Ushuaia. So that's a really sort of bare bones look at what the itinerary is. I wanted to give you a sense of the ship. So this is the Silver Cloud. She started off as a luxury cruise liner. 300 guests, very, very small luxury cruise liner. But then it was quickly realized she'd make an excellent expedition ship, particularly a luxury expedition ship. You can see what she looks like now. But this is what the interiors look like. So this $70 million refurb wasn't just about buying Zodiacs and kayaks and putting more ice in the hull so that she could go into these regions. It was a complete overhaul where she had that sort of old school, dark wood, dark carpets, very shippy feel. Now it's very contemporary, light colors, neutral tones. Everything looks bright and airy and spacious and big. You know, this is one of the bigger suites, but
Why don't you reference the speed of this ship and how it's different with some other cruise lines that sail down to Antarctica?
Yeah, I mentioned that when we talked a little bit about the Drake, that this ship will do 18.1 knots. So it really helps when we want to steer clear of any weather that is coming our way, or we want to get to Antarctica quicker. So by doing 18.1 knots, we're 2 or 3 knots faster than a lot of the ships that are heading down there. So it just means that we're more nimble. We can get out of the way of some of the weather or beat the weather if we need to. This is the entry-level suite on this ship, by the way. So not too bad for, what is it? I think 370 square feet. She has a pool. She's got a jacuzzi or hot tub. So believe it or not, we'll warm the water in the pool, and there will be people when we're down in Antarctica or in South Georgia in the Falklands swimming, certainly in the jacuzzi, but I've seen many people swim as well. This is the outdoor grill, one of the dining options. So what we'll do if the weather's nice, and you know, sometimes it can be well into the 30s. So with heat lamps out and with your parka on and dressed up, you might just want to grab a quick chicken on a bun or a burger or something for lunch. It's a very sort of casual grill at lunch. In the evening, this turns into hot rocks. We bring you a piece of granite that's been superheated, and then a piece of raw fish or some scallops or shrimp or scampi or a piece of steak or lamb chops, and you cook it yourself on that hot stone. So it's a real fun experience when you're out there doing that. This is La Dame, which is our French themed restaurant. Very, very limited capacity. I think we're only 22 guests at a time. It's a fixed menu with wine pairing. This one, there is an additional cost to, but it's only $60. And it's just because we can only accommodate 22 people here, it's just to sort of cut down on the number of reservations we get on it, because there is that $60 charge. It's absolutely worth it for the wines you're going to experience alone, because I think there are 9 courses and a wine pairing with each course. This is the main dining room. One of the lounges called Dolce Vita. The connoisseur's corner. So if you want to smoke a cigar, you want to have a fine cognac, you want to have a really nice whiskey, you can head into the connoisseur's corner. So you can see this is a very, very comfortable, very, very luxurious ship in one of the most remote and inhospitable parts of the world. So it's adventure by day, and then you come back at night and you've got this incredible luxury and this incredible comfort. This is the observation lounge, very comfortable, nice quiet spot to have a coffee, go through the library, check out, take a look at some of the books there, usually very specific to the region that we're in. And then this is the lecture theater. And I wanted to touch on this a little bit and take a minute to talk about this. Of course, at the beginning of the voyage, as we're crossing the Drake, there will be lectures in here, safety briefings, something called the IATO briefing. IATO is the governing body in Antarctica, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, of which we are a member. And the IATO briefing is about biosecurity and things like that. And you'll know, or you'll notice when you're doing an Antarctic trip, every time you come back from having stepped foot on land, whether the continent or one of the islands, we have you walk your boots through a solution that will, a germicide, herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, it'll kill anything that's on your boots. The idea being, we don't want to transfer even a lichen off a rock from one spot in Antarctica to another spot. We don't want to be any agents of change when we're down there. So safety briefings, IATO briefings, biosecurity briefing, that sort of thing. But the other important part about the lecture theater is that every day we have what's called the recap and the briefing. So you've been ashore in the morning, you've Zodiac cruised in the morning. You've come back to the ship for lunch. In the afternoon, you went kayaking, and then you went on another Zodiac cruise. And then when you come back to the ship at 6, at 7, this is where we'll gather everybody. You've got a cocktail in your hand. You're listening to the expedition staff talk about, where did we go today? And why was it important? What's significant about this place? What did we see? And here's the Latin name and here's the English name for the birds and the seals and the whales and the penguins that we saw today. And for those of you keeping track, here's the temperature, here's the latitude and longitude, all of those sorts of things. That's the recap. We're recapping what happened today. The second part of this meeting is called the briefing. Here's where we're going tomorrow. And they'll put a map up on the screen. They'll show the navigation sort of dotted line on the map. This is where we are. This is where we're going to navigate to overnight. When we arrive there tomorrow morning, here's our plan. The plan is to do A, B, C, D throughout the course of the day, wind and weather and ice conditions permitting. And so they'll give you an outline of what the schedule is the following day. If it's a day at sea, great. We're going to have lectures at 9, 11, 2, and 4. And the lectures are with these 4 people on these 4 topics. So they're always telling you how best to plan your day the next day. An outdoor observation area. So a lot of opportunity on the ship, a lot of places on the deck as well to get out and look at the icebergs, to look at the whales, even the albatross when you're sailing across. One thing that I love that was part of the conversion with this ship, somebody had the foresight to say, well, rather than have a casino, we pulled the casino out, and rather have this great big boutique, we took some of the space away from the boutique, and it's about half the size it was. We created a photo studio or photo cafe. So these are very, very powerful computers with very well calibrated monitors, because what happens now with digital photography? We take hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of images. And the plan always is, I'm going to go home, I'm going to pick the best ones, and I'm going to tweak them a little bit, and I'm going to have them printed, and then I'm going to have them framed, and then I'm going to mount them. And you never do it, right? Because you come home with thousands of them, and then life gets in the way and you never do anything. At the end of an Antarctic cruise is the perfect time to take care of a lot of that stuff. You head to the photo cafe, you've got your hundreds and hundreds of images, you work with the photo studio manager on one of these very powerful computers with one of these high-res monitors, pick your top 6 or your top 10. And that person will help you in a post-production manner pick up the best colors and you know, tweak this and crop that and do all these photography tricks so that it brings out the absolute best in those photographs. And then we have an 18-inch and a 22-inch printer. These aren't the little HP, and nothing against HP. These aren't, you know, Epson or HP or whatever printers that you can get at Best Buy or off Amazon for $200 with 2 or 4 ink cartridges. These things have 12, 15, 16 different ink cartridges, all with a different color. And then it'll print either 18 inches wide or 22 inches wide. This photograph that you just spent some time tweaking, I think the cost for the prints is $18 for the 18-inch one and $25 for the 22-inch wide one or something. It's really nominal. Now you've got this museum or gallery quality print on gallery quality paper. You roll it up, put it in a tube, and now 3 out of those 4 processes are done. All you have to do now is take it to a decent framing shop at home and frame it. So it's a great way to use your time if you're a keen photographer. So I love the photo studio on board. And there's the sauna on board. So we really are talking about the perfect combination of expedition and luxury. If you'd like to read more or discover more about Antarctica, we've got a great blog at discover.silversea.com, and a couple of great writers, Pico Iyer and Steve McCurry. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer that we sent to Antarctica, and he talks about his experience there. Same with Pico Iyer. We took him to Antarctica and his experience there. Similarly, the video that I showed you right at the beginning, and many, many, many other videos about Antarctica, if you go to our YouTube channel, go to YouTube and then look up Silversea. We have our own channel. And then if you do a search within our channel on Antarctica, I think you'll find 15 or 20 videos just about Antarctica, some about different species of penguins. It gets that detailed. So there's a lot that you can do to sort of up your knowledge. And that's everything I have. Why don't I stop the sharing and we can go back and see each other on screen and see if we have any more questions.
One question came through to me asking what time dinner was. Do you know about?
Yeah, probably like 7:30 or so. If you wanted to go earlier, you could. If you wanted to skip the recap and the briefing, you could certainly do that. Alternatively, you know, if you're back at the ship by 6 and the recap and the briefing's not starting till 7 and you don't want to go that long before eating, then go straight into your room, into your suite, and order something from room service just to tide you over till dinner. Have them bring you a BLT or, you know,
Great. Okay.
something simple.
Dinner usually starts around 7:30.
Yeah.
But you know, there's 4 restaurants on board, so guests can choose where they want to dine. And if they don't even want to go out for dinner, they can have a full diner menu served in their suite by their butler. So if they want their steak or the lobster, they can have it served to them in suite and by course if they'd like.
Oh, great. Thanks. That was the only question that came to me.
There's another one. Do you have any experience with passengers who use wheelchairs? Have you been able to take them ashore? My wife uses a wheelchair and is unable to walk. It's a very, very challenging destination to do this because of the pebble beaches and that sort of thing. I was recently on a call where we were talking about the Galapagos and someone asked about a beach wheelchair. And the gentleman who runs our Galapagos operation, who's an Ecuadorian, lives in Guayaquil, has spent his entire career managing hotels or managing ships in the Galapagos. And he said, even with a beach wheelchair, it's not a great idea in the Galapagos. You would just be so limited. I would make the same case here. I think you'd be very, very limited. I know that the expedition team would do everything they could to help get your wife into a Zodiac, and then at the other end, get her out of a Zodiac, and then maybe into the waiting chair. But again, I just feel like it would be an exercise in frustration. I'm sure so much is an exercise in frustration right now, but yeah, cruise ships, most of them are just not designed for it to begin with. And certainly the destination does not lend itself to anybody with mobility issues. I'm sorry to say. It sounds like the deep Antarctica expedition goes beyond the circle. Do any of the other routes do that? It's been on my list for as long as I've wanted to do an Antarctic adventure. There's that one in late January of 22. That's 20 days long. And the following one is 12 days. And again, late in the season and with the Explorer, they intend to try and cross the circle. So there's a 12-day version and a 20-day version. And yeah, further south, they want to go as far south as they can. They certainly plan to cross the circle. As far as the ice conditions and the ship's ice class will allow them to get, that's as far south as they want to go. With the excellent cameras available on the newer cell phones, are specialized camera equipment really necessary? I wouldn't say necessary. It depends to what extent you're a photography buff. I would say these days that probably 75, 80% of our guests get by with their cell phone camera. There are a few who, as I said, will take their camera gear, who will buy new gear just for something like this. Something to mention, and I'm sorry I didn't before, on all of our expedition cruises, and this is unique to the expedition product, there is an onboard filmmaker. So this person is documenting the trip, usually with video images, but they can pull stills from those as well. And they just start filming the whole thing, the guests, the wildlife, different guests doing different things, walking through the ship, taking note of what the weather was like on that particular voyage. And then each evening they go back and they edit that day's footage and they trim it down. And then by the final night, it's your last night on the ship, you'll be invited to the lecture theater to watch the world premiere screening of the film. And depending on how long your voyage is, that film might be anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes long. And it's your voyage, it's specific to you. And you'll see yourself periodically in that film. And when you get the USB, and this is free, every guest gets a USB with that film on it. And there are typically a number of images as well, still images. So if you don't want to do any photography, you don't even want to take your cell phone and spend any time behind the viewfinder of a camera, don't worry about it, because your voyage will be very, very well documented, and you'll get this USB stick to prove that. So, you know, and it's one, if there's an insider tip I would give you, I noticed on my very, very first voyage, I was just blown away by everything. And this was in 2002. We were still shooting film. So I forget how many rolls. I think I shot 40 something rolls of 36 image film, slide film. I had to put my camera away. We had like an open door policy on the ship but I locked it in the safe and locked the closet that the safe was in and locked my suite door, so that I had to go through 3 locks to get my camera, so that I finally put it away for a couple of days and not experience Antarctica through the lens of, or the viewfinder of, my camera. So that's one piece of advice is, you know, at least 1 or 2 of the days, or one morning or one afternoon, leave your camera in your suite and just experience it all around you. So I hope
Any other questions? Well, what I'd like to offer all of you is that, first of all, Carl and I would like to thank you all, and Heidi, like, thank you all for coming. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Heidi, and she'll get in contact with us and we can answer them for you. As attending today, we want to share with you a special little offer. We have a $500 per suite savings if you want to join Heidi on her cruise. Or if you can't make that cruise, but you want to sail with Silversea, we have all of our voyages listed for this year through the early winter, particularly for the expedition product, through early 2023. So you'll find them all on our website. And Heidi can help you with any of the other voyages. You know, Silversea is one of the largest, or by the middle of next year, we will be the largest luxury cruise line in the industry. We'll have 10 ships in operation, 4 expedition, and 6 of the classic fleet. So we fall into that small luxury cruise ship category, not only offering our classic luxury cruising experience, but also our expedition luxury cruising. So if there's a destination that's on your bucket list in the world, we probably will be going to it, with over 950 destinations in the world that we cover every year. So if you would like to join us on another cruise in another part of the world, take a look at the itineraries on the website and just ask Heidi, and then we'll be happy to apply that $500 per suite savings for you once you make your decision.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, thank you very much for attending. We appreciate it.
All right.
And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.